Morning, guys. Thanks all for coming along. So I'm going to keep this fairly informal. I'm not really a fan of standing up behind a lectern. So my name is Brad McIntyre. I'm the country manager for Eventbrite in New Zealand. I've got a few things to cover off today. I'm going to start just looking at a little bit of research that we conducted on event goers and just understanding, I guess, how people are feeling about the live experience in 2018. And so it's, I guess at times feels like people's demand for live experiences might start to dwindle given the amount of time that we spend on devices and sitting at home on laptops or Netflix or whatever that might be. So I'm just going to dive into a few interesting findings from that. And then from there, really link that to some of the trends that we are seeing in technology and technology for events. Firstly, I apologise to those of you who might feel a bit shortchanged. I know it was going to be 7 event tech trends. I've shortened it down to 5. The kind of presentation got a little bit too long, and so hopefully these 5 will be interesting to you guys and will give you some kind of insight into some potential technology that you can look to use for your events. Just quickly, I just wanted to give a quick sense of who Eventbrite is and what we do. And so we are a global platform for live experiences. We're number 1 in the world in terms of the number of events that are run through our platform. And we're processing about $3 billion worth of tickets each year. And we have people buying tickets in 180 countries. And so in New Zealand, we've had about 70,000 events run through the platform, and half of those have been in the last 18 months. So New Zealand organisers seem to enjoy what Eventbrite can offer. In terms of the types of events we're working with, so I'm going to talk today about a bunch of trends that I think are relevant across a number of different types of events. And so we work with large music festivals all the way through to universities, sports event organisers, and also festivals and consumer events. So a lot of food and wine events. We've got the New Zealand Coffee Festival there. And so we learn a lot from a lot of different organisers, and I think there's a lot that applies across all of these different categories. And I guess one of the things for me, when I deal with all of these organisers and I'm talking to them, every event is obviously different. Every audience that they're targeting is different. And there's no real silver bullet in terms of how to run a successful event and also how to utilise technology when you are running your event. And so the things I'm going to talk about today, I guess understand what these are all about, take it into account, think about what your event is all about, what you're trying to achieve. Try things out, test, iterate, see if it works. If it doesn't, move on. And I guess, that's the kind of key for being a successful organizer is trying a lot of different things and understanding what works for your event. Cool. So if we think about the live experience, obviously humans have been gathering for a very long time, probably since the beginning of time, since humans existed. We all get together for various different reasons. And I think, the live experience has really stood the test of time. And they are essential, I guess, for having a fulfilled life. But events are changing. So today, and I think you would all agree, the attendee expectation is changing rapidly. People are a lot more fussy. They've got a lot more options of things to do. And they also spend a lot of time on their devices. And so it can be, at times, as I mentioned at the start, you can kind of start to think, is the live experience going to diminish? Potentially, is this the future of the live experience? Are people going to just spend their time in virtual reality? Are they going to be always online? And I think from our point of view, it's a big no way to that. And so, when we zoom out and think about technology and the developments that have happened, we really notice that our physical and virtual world has really been commoditized. So things like the CD, you now go online and you can stream music via Spotify. You can have anything in the world delivered to you within a few days. If you want food, you can usually get that delivered within an hour. And so what we're seeing is this kind of merging of the online and offline worlds. And there really is no replacement for real life for these sort of experiences where you're dealing with people face to face. And so with the research that we did, we were really trying to understand what are people's broad opinions around the live experience, and how are they looking to use that live experience to kind of fulfill their life. Cool. So one of the main, findings was that 84% of us feel more connected to people in the community through live experiences. And so people still want that in-person connection and interaction. The very vast majority of us do. Another really key finding was 4 out of 5 of us would choose to buy experiences over products. I think that's really key. We did this research, I think, 2 years ago as well, and this rate is actually increasing. So the more kind of technology that we see people using, and the more options out there, the more that people are actually demanding that in-person and live experiences. Cool. So what part does our online world play in that? I think we've kind of established that people do still demand the live experiences, and we would prefer to spend money on those sort of experiences. But it's clear as well that in parallel, our online world is growing. People are spending more time online. There's more things to do online as well. In particular, people are spending a lot of time on social networks, and so there was some research that was conducted recently that the average person is going to spend about 5 years of their life on social platforms, which is a pretty huge amount of time, I think. But the key, I guess, for an event organizer is how do you leverage the fact that people are going to spend so much time online and the fact that they are keen to interact with people face to face, and kind of fuse those two worlds together. So this 5 years online, obviously social networks are a relatively new, in the scheme of things, are a relatively new concept. And so what we're seeing over the past few years is the fact that people are spending a lot of time, but the way they're spending that time is also evolving. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of, key comparisons among different sections of the population in terms of how they're spending their time online. Cool, so if we, for the purposes of this exercise, if we compare millennials to Gen Z, you've got millennials on the left, so there's a bunch of different definitions out there for millennials, but we've set it here at 20 to 34 years of age. So generally those people historically have communicated with text, they're curators and sharers, and they would use 2 screens at once. If we move to the younger generation, which is Gen Z, that's more of a tech-innate generation, and so they're using more devices, and they typically communicate with images, and they're looking to create and collaborate a lot more. And I think the point around communicating with images is really important for event organizers, and I'll dive into that a little, why that is in a bit more detail soon. Following on from that, if we look at the number of photos shared on a bunch of different platforms in the last sort of 10 to 12 years, this is a couple of years out of date, but I think that you get the idea with the trend. We're seeing a huge explosion in the amount of images that people are sharing. And I think there's some really nice parallels or connections that can be drawn with this fact that people are sharing way more images online, but they are demanding live experiences, because obviously those live experiences are opportunities to create content and images, which I'll talk about now. So some other findings that came out of that research. So 4 out of 5 of us, we feel more connected to other live experiences by seeing them online. 2 out of 3 of us have live streamed an event, and that could be something as simple as Facebook Live, which is pretty prevalent, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And 1 out of 2 people attends just to share content online. And so what you're seeing is this kind of fusing of the online and offline worlds. And it's really, we're at a time where our online and offline worlds are more connected than ever. So with the kind of millennial and Gen Z audience that I talked about, for them, they use these events to create what's called social currency, basically. And so they go along, they take photos, they might take a video, and that they use that to create their identity and curate an identity online. And so I think the key for an event organizer is understanding how do you harness that to get people along to your event. And obviously you've got a bunch of different platforms, so Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram. These are all enabling that behavior. And the other, I guess, key element of that are mobile devices. And so you've got the development of mobile and the technology, which makes it much easier to take photos. You've got the platforms to share them, and then you've got the kind of live experiences that people go to. And so if you connect all of that together, people are creating this identity. And we're seeing some really strong stats around mobile. So if you look at Google searches, about 58% of them are on mobile now. Facebook reporting that 75% of their ad traffic is via mobile. And then if you look at it through an Eventbrite lens, so around about 50% of our page views come from mobile devices, and 53% of our global ticket sales are via mobile devices. So what does this all mean for organisers? So I think the key really is to enable that connection between the online and offline worlds, take advantage of technology that can help to achieve this. It's clear that people are going to continue to use technology, probably more and more, but they're also going to continue to demand a live experience. And what we see that the live experiences or events that are succeeding are fusing those online worlds really well. So if you look at an event like Rhythm and Vines as an example, they've now gotten themselves to a point where last year they sold out earlier than they ever have. This year they've already sold 5,000 tickets for their event, which is not for another 11 months. And the reason they've done that is that they've enabled this curation of content, and they've enabled an experience to be communicated online to their audience, and they're creating what's called FOMO, so fear of missing out. So people are going to these events, they're sharing online. It's made really easy by the organisers. The organisers themselves are sharing via their social platforms, and you're creating this fear of missing out, I guess, and that is leading directly to ticket sales for them. Cool. So now I'm just going to move on and just start chatting about some of these trends that I've identified. I think the key is to think about what your event is all about and what you're trying to achieve, and understand whether or not these trends are something that would work for you, and when you think about kind of fusing that online and offline world. Cool, so the first one is AI and automation, and I think for me, AI is one of those terms that's been bandied about a lot recently, and I don't know if you guys are the same, but initially when you think about AI, you probably just think about robots or some kind of automation, and it's hard to kind of understand how is that going to impact my everyday life, and then in my working life, if you're an event organizer, how is AI going to impact that? And so there's a couple of things that I'm going to chat about that I think are relevant to event organisers, and one in particular which we're seeing a lot of uptake for with some of our organisers as well. I'll just skip past that one. Sorry, this is a little bit small, but basically the point I'm making here, there's 4 kind of key areas of AI that have been identified. If we look at the top one, which is intelligent assistant or chatbots, you can see there around about 50% of businesses within the next 2 to 3 years expect to use this technology. It's obviously the highest in terms of businesses that are actually using it at the moment, with 19%, and all the way down to the robots that I mentioned before is kind of at the bottom of the AI tree, I guess, in that sense. And so what I'm going to do is just chat through 3 of these areas from an events perspective, and then go into a little bit more detail about chatbots, because I think those are, for me, are the most interesting and I guess easiest to deploy for an event organizer. Cool, so when we think about AI, I kind of pulled out 3 key ones, so personalization and recommendations. So there's a bunch of different technology out there now, which, particularly through event apps, which enables session matching and networking using AI. And so essentially what the technology is doing is it's pulling data from different sources. So it might be a social network, it might be information that they've inputted on a form online. And it's using that data to understand who that person is, and then it's recommending sessions to them. The other thing that's happening is it's also using that data to match 2 different people. And so you've got apps these days that will actually match sessions to the person, and then also match people to them so that they can understand, hey, this is a person I probably should be meeting because of X, Y, and Z. That technology is available now. It is obviously a little bit more expensive than the chatbots ones that I'm going to talk about, but it's worth understanding more about how that works. There's a bunch of examples from events overseas where they've rolled out an app that has this technology in it. Deep learning is really about using different data points and understanding how you can make the attendee experience better, but also make the deployment of resources and behind the scenes activity a lot slicker and smoother. So one example of that is you have the ability to track footfall or check-in frequency at an event and use that information to understand where you should be deploying security or how many security guards you should have. You can use it for the serving of food. So if you've got a particular rush of people at a certain area, we need to serve more food over there. I would say that sort of technology is maybe in its infancy and is probably a few years off being used broadly. But I think it's really interesting when you think about the experience that you could have as a punter in terms of moving through a crowd or moving through an event, but also as the organizer, you're being fed all this information to understand more about how your crowd's behaving, and you can use that information how you see fit. And number three, so the most commonly used one that I've seen, and I've got a couple of examples on the next slide, is chatbots. And so these are being used across a whole bunch of different industries. There's a lot of application in customer service, and so we use, as Eventbrite, we use chatbots in overseas markets in order to deal with customer queries. So that's saving, that's saving time on having someone actually pick up the phone or have to reply to an email. You can actually just have a chatbot answer specific questions instantly, basically. So if I look at a couple of examples in the event space, so on the left here, you've got you've basically got a chatbot that's a dynamic chatbot that can feed you information about a specific event. It's happening within an event app. And so you can ask different questions. You can ask location of the toilets or whatever it might be that you want to know. You can also ask about different sessions. And the chatbot will feed information back to you that it thinks is relevant. And so this is all about improving that attendee experience. Obviously, with people's use of mobile phones and technology, they want access to information really quickly. Chatbots can achieve that for you, and it means that you can cut down on staff and people can get to where they're going a lot quicker. The one on the right-hand side is actually one of our clients, the Heineken Urban Polo. This is a bit more of a simpler application, but essentially when they put a post out on Facebook, I commented on that post, and immediately I got a message into Facebook Messenger from Urban Polo saying, hey, thanks for showing interest, would you like to buy tickets? And so that's an automated process, so everyone that comments on any of their posts will automatically get that message, and it's driving them to buy tickets. And so it's fairly easy to set that up, and I think it's quite a clever way of trying to drive ticket sales from that initial interest of actually just commenting on a post. Cool. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was distributed commerce. So I guess I would wager that pretty much everyone here has had some form of pain in trying to buy a ticket online at some point. I know that I have a lot of platforms that can take a lot of time. Often you'll give up because it's too frustrating. And then at the end, sometimes you don't even know whether it's actually gone through and you've got your ticket. And so one of the ways that the ticketing industry, I guess, is trying to deal to that is the idea of distributed commerce, which is essentially taking the ticket purchase experience to where a consumer is and making it super easy for them to actually buy the ticket. So if we look at a comparison of the retail market at someone like Amazon, obviously they've put a lot of resource and research into that checkout flow and making sure that it's super easy. And so the example here is the buy now with one click. If you look at the ticketing industry, probably hasn't put that much money and resource into making that process super easy. And so at Eventbrite, that's something that we have kind of focused on over the last few years to try and cut down the number of processes, steps it takes to buy a ticket and make it super easy. So So often as an organizer, you'll spend a lot of time and money on social media, on email, whatever it might be, but you don't think about what is the actual method of purchasing my ticket. You've got your platform there, but it's amazing how many organisers I meet who haven't actually been through and bought a ticket for their event to understand what the process is. And so I think there's definitely an opportunity to ensure that you've got a really slick, easy process for that ticket purchase. And it's been shown to have a massive impact. So every second delay in page load time, you're looking at a 7% decrease in conversion. A few more stats. 1 in 10 buyers will drop off for every additional step. This is some research that Ticketmaster did. 1 in 4 will drop off if an account login is required. And if you convert that as an organizer into kind of dollar value, looking at, you drive 20,000 visitors to your page, that conversion rate, if you up it from say 4 to 6%, you're looking at an extra $120,000 in ticket revenue. That's an extreme example. I would say if you can get from 4 to 5%, you're doing well, but the point is you should be thinking about the conversion of your traffic to ticket sales. And historically, with ticketing, you spend marketing dollars driving people to a website, and then they go off and they go to the ticketing platform. And so there's to your website, to the ticketing platform, and through all these processes. You're not really understanding much about the consumer, where they're coming from, and that sort of thing. And so it can be reasonably expensive, and you can't really track a lot of it, which is frustrating. If we look at the present, this new model, which I called distributed commerce at the start, is essentially taking the purchase process to where a consumer is and enabling them to buy a ticket really quickly. And so if I look at an example, which is, I'm going to go back to the Heineken Urban Polo, this is an example of their ticket purchase process that they have implemented through us on Facebook. So normally when you go to a Facebook event, I think I've got a little laser somewhere here, you'll get a button here that you click through and it goes to the ticket purchase website. What they've actually got set up is a get tickets button, and this whole process stays completely within Facebook. You hit the +1 or 2 or however many you want, you hit continue, all my details are saved in here, and then I hit pay and you're done. So it's a couple of steps and you bought a ticket. And the other cool part is that you can actually, when you rock up to the event, go back into the Facebook event, select your ticket, and your QR code will pop up. And so that whole process is about going to where the consumer is, and this is kind of the first step in that through Facebook. There's a bunch of other platforms that are being worked on, so YouTube is one, and a bunch of other social networks where we want to enable people to buy the ticket where they are. If you're spending a bunch of money on Facebook advertising, you want to be able to convert that into sales really quickly, and technology like this helps do that. The other example, just quickly, is embedding within a website, and so there's no reason nowadays to not have this technology enabled. Essentially, if you're not dealing with Facebook as much or social platforms, or you're actually driving people to your website, enabling people to buy a ticket within that website is pretty critical. And there's a bunch of platforms that do that now, and it means that you're controlling that process a lot better. If we look, ahead to the future, this isn't available now, but I think there is potential. I don't know how many of you know Amazon Echo, but you've got these smart devices in your home. You play music through them. You can order an Uber. You can order food. I don't think it's too outrageous to see ordering tickets happening at some point in the future. So if you're listening to Lord and after the song it pops up and said, hey, I see that you like Lord, would you like to buy a ticket? It's all about removing friction, going to where people are, understanding what they're interested in, and enabling them to buy a ticket really quickly. Cool. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was personalization. And so the idea of personalization has been around in marketing for quite a while, and I think has been used pretty extensively in the retail space, trying to convert people to buy shoes or whatever it might be. But I think it's something that event organisers need to start, putting some more attention into and understanding how can I personalise the experience. And so there's a bunch of different ways I'm going to talk through. I think about 4 sort of areas that I think there is room for personalization. But firstly, this whole idea of getting to know your audience. So I mentioned at the start that people have a lot of options for events to go to. They're also very busy, they're online. And so in order to kind of stay ahead of the game and keep people coming back to your event, you really need to demonstrate that you know who they are, and that you can give them an experience that they want. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. And so I guess initially it starts with, where am I getting my data from? What can I understand about my audience? And so the first location I would go is your technology platform. So whichever ticketing or registration platform you're using, you should be able to understand, is this a new buyer? Are they a returning buyer? Where are they buying from? Are they located in Wellington? Are they in Auckland? Where did they come from to buy the ticket? So was it directly from an email? Was it through Facebook? Was it from a banner ad? And when are they purchasing? So you can use all of that information to do some really basic personalization. So an example might be, I know that this person has been to my event 4 times, or I know that this group of people have been to my event 4 times. I want to send out a special offer, a personalized email out to them before we go on sale to everyone else. That's a really basic example, but you're showing that you understand that they've been to your event, and you're treating them a little bit differently to everyone else. The next area where you can kind of glean some information is web analytics. So Google Analytics is really good for understanding these sorts of things. So location, sources, age, gender, mobile device, and top interests. And then finally, Facebook Insights, I would say, probably one of the best places to get some really in-depth information about people. And so you can understand things like age, average income, relationship status, purchase behavior, all of these things, which I know feels a little bit big brotherish, but as a marketer or as an event organizer, it's super helpful for building up a picture of your audience, and then tailoring your marketing, and then also tailoring your event to those people. Cool, so there's 4 kind of areas that I'll focus on. So the first is personalized marketing. So I mentioned before that retailers have used this for a number of years, and that started off with something really basic like Dear Brad in the subject line, and then started to move towards actually understanding purchase behavior, recommending specific products within an email, and that obviously has a positive impact on the rate of purchase. From an event standpoint, I mentioned before, reward people that have attended before, show that you understand that, but also try and understand what sort of topics are they interested in. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do that, obviously through the Facebook insights that I talked about, but if you're doing post-event surveys, have a question about, what topic was most of interest to you, what are you thinking about for the next year? Use that information to build it into your marketing for next year, so that people feel like it's more relevant to them. The next part is personalized check-in. So I couldn't find a good real-world image of this, so I came across this pretty clunky cartoon-looking thing, but there are a bunch of companies that are doing basically personalized check-in that scans your face when you arrive, recognizes who you are, checks you in, and then also recommends sessions or content for you. You can also have those throughout an event, so it'll basically be like a session planner. So you go up, it scans their face, recognizes who they are. They can select the different sessions they're interested in. That'll then build out their personalized schedule that'll be in the app for them. This technology is obviously not that cheap, and it's not used by a lot of organizers, but I think it's really interesting to think about where that experience is going. I know, when you go through customs and you can just get your face scanned and walk through, it's a lot easier process than having to wait in line, pull out your passport, see someone, and it's the same with an event check-in. If you can just walk up, get your face scanned, walk through, it makes things a whole lot easier. Another area is personalized scheduling. So this is a screenshot from a company called Attendify. So they do event apps, and they enable essentially a building of a personalized schedule. And so you can import information about each attendee, wherever you might have got that from. You can pull that into the back end of Attendify. They call it an attendee grid. And from that, it pulls in all the information, and then it will recommend sessions for people based on the information that you provide. And so you're already providing a personalized schedule before they've even showed up. Then they can add or subtract to that how they see fit. The other one is personalized networking. Sorry, this is a little bit of a lot of detail on there, but essentially this is another platform called Grip, and that allows you to input different data fields and then match people based on their interests. And so on there you'll see interested in luxury product type frames. I assume this is to do with sunglasses or glasses. And so you're using different data points for different people to match them for networking or scheduled meetings. And so that technology, I think, is really powerful. I think if you want people to get the most out of your event and you have some form of networking at it, looking at utilizing this sort of technology is would certainly be of benefit. Cool. So the fourth one I want to talk about was augmented reality. And I think, again, as with AI, I think augmented reality can be something that's a little bit abstract or, it doesn't feel that real to a lot of people. There's been a couple of examples, which I'll go through in a second, of consumer applications of this technology. But what we're starting to see is more B2B or business kind of applications, and we're seeing huge prediction and growth of the AR market. So a lot of you probably recognize one of the more famous kind of instances of AR technology, and Pokemon Go came out. I think it generated about 30 million app downloads in a really short space of time, a bunch of revenue for Nintendo, and then it seemed to kind of disappear within a month. And so I think for me what Pokemon Go showed is that when done well, augmented reality, people are interested in using this technology, and augmented reality can be or can heighten your kind of real world experience. I know a lot of people got annoyed because people would be buried in their phone walking around, but the amount of hours that a lot of people spent on it showed that the technology, when done well, can work. The other example, which is less sophisticated, is Snapchat. And so with Snapchat filters, you've got a version of augmented reality as well. And so the point here is that there are some pretty broad consumer applications of the technology, and people are, on the whole, kind of used to using augmented reality in some way, even if they don't think of it as augmented reality. And that is being reflected in these predictions. So 2016, the market value for AR was about 2.39 billion. It's predicted to rise to 61 by 2023, which is huge growth. The other area which I found really interesting was the shipments of AR glasses. And so a few of you might know the whole Google Glass product, which kind of came with a lot of noise around it and then kind of seemed to disappear. And I think one of the main problems was the way that those looked. And so it's really interesting to see this 22 million units of glasses predicted to ship by 2022. And I went online and did a bit of research. Obviously what's happening now is the glasses are becoming more and more like normal glasses. And so I think once you get to the point where normal glasses have some form of augmented reality technology within them, that's when it'll really start to take off. But what does this mean for events? And so there's a bunch of different applications. An example that we used at an event we ran last year was around posters, and particularly festival posters. And so we had one of our clients' festivals with all of their lineup on it, and we had some tablet devices that had an AR app on them. And essentially what happened was when you held the camera up to the poster, that poster came alive, and you could actually click on the different artists, and information would come out and show their top songs, information about that act, what time they were playing at the festival, and all of these different things that kind of add to that experience. And And for me, that was, the reaction that people gave was really positive. I think AR needs to now kind of move to being, more easily accessible for the everyday person. Not everyone's going to have a tablet to hold up to a poster, but how can you integrate it into your event and show something that's really cool and forward thinking? And then in the future, as with the example with the posters, how can you integrate AR into your advertising? So if you are doing out of home, and once people are more used to using AR tech on their devices, or once more people have the glasses with AR technology in them, how are you integrating that into what you're doing to kind of stand out from the crowd there? Cool. The final thing I wanted to chat about was live streaming. And so I mentioned, I think in one of the stats that use of live streaming is quite high amongst the population. That's mainly because we've now got technology platforms that enable live streaming for free, and it's pretty simple to use. But I dug up a couple of quite interesting stats. So from livestream.com, 43% of live consumption is speakers or performers at conferences or events. So that's second only to breaking news. So I think it's about 58% of live content watched online is breaking news. 43% is related to events, which is really exciting. And then from that, 67% of viewers say that they're more likely to buy a ticket after watching live video of an event. One of the, best real-world examples of that is the music festival Coachella. So I think it was about 2012 when they started to stream the whole event live online. And a lot of people said they were crazy because it would cannibalize their ticket sales and people would just watch online instead. And what actually happened was their ticket sales exploded because they were experiencing what it's like to be at the event online, and they said, hey, I want to go. And so when you think about live streaming, what you're wanting to do is create that action with someone, or you create that FOMO to get them to want to come along. So a couple of platforms that you can use for live streaming. The simplest would be Facebook Live. I'll talk about another option if your audience is not on Facebook so much, or if you don't use it that much. But there's some really interesting stats around Facebook Live. So Facebook Live videos are watched 3 times longer than videos that aren't live, and users comment at 10 times the rate on live videos as they do on recorded ones. And so when you're thinking about getting people engaged with your event, live video is a really simple way to do that. And with Facebook Live, it's obviously free. 1 in 5 videos on Facebook are now live. And so the key point there is that what was technology for kind of influencers and brands is now moving more into the mainstream. And I don't know about you guys, but I see a bunch of live videos popping up on my feed from my friends at events. And it's way more interesting to look at that sort of content, I think. The final one is YouTube Live. And so this is, if you're speaking to more of a business audience and you're looking for a more fuller solution, there is the ability to stream live on YouTube. A basic setup, I think, is about 5 steps. And this also enables you to create recordings of your event and distribute them post-event. You can chop them up into different segments and create some really rich content at a pretty minimal cost. Again, it's a great solution if you're not really utilizing Facebook that much, or you think your audience isn't on Facebook. I would go towards YouTube Live. Cool. So that's kind of the trends that I wanted to cover off. Some of them are really useful right now and are free and easy to use. Others may be useful in a few years' time and quite expensive. But I think all of it is really interesting right now to understand what's going on in those spaces, understand what would work for your event and your audience, and I guess test things out. Just before I finish, if any of you are after more information about trends or more different parts of information about events, so the example there is pricing strategy, but we produce a lot of content on social media, on marketing for events. Jump onto our blog. At the moment it's a .com.au. I'm about to launch a .co.nz blog, but there's a bunch of really interesting content on there to help event organisers. Cool. Any questions? Yep.
Sure.
Hi.
You covered the millennials and Gen Z, but you didn't talk about the older segment of the population.
Yep.
Which actually, if we're looking silver dollar, there's a really big sort of market out there.
Sure.
And so I wondered if you had any tips for that sort of segment, and also the 1 in 4 people in New Zealand who are disabled or have access issues, because some of these tools won't be as useful for people who don't use them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as you look into the older age groups, they are lagging behind a little bit in use of, say, social networks as an example, but they are starting to come onto Facebook at quite large numbers. And so Facebook is one example where the usage is actually quite uniform across age groups. You've got a bunch of 40 plus people going on that platform, interacting with their kids, getting used to that whole social, social engagement. In terms of the disability side of things, that's a tough one for me to answer. So I think, obviously it's something that all event organisers should take into account when they're organising their event. I'm not quite sure how, in terms of interaction on social platforms, how you cater to that audience. And it was...
To you that you're not using your Twitter account anymore. So in terms of actually using the platforms,
Right.
what is accessibility sort of stuff, like voice readers, is the website sort of readable, all of those types of things.
Sure. So you're talking about our website in particular, or just in general for events?
Just in general.
Yeah, it's unfortunately not something I know a lot about, but I'm happy to have a chat afterwards to understand more about that. The issues that are faced.
Let's say apps access at the device on the website, or if you're using external platforms at the device.
Oh yeah, so I got as an attendee at events, I want everybody to be doing things for me. As an organizer of events, I try and be mindful, but it's just like not everybody in the room might, have that commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm keen to learn more for sure. Yep.
With more events moving to like an app-based platform,
Yep.
have you found that it's kind of knowledge that an event now has an app, certain people download it automatically, or is there quite a lot of work that needs to go into marketing that you now have an app and people need to download it to experience the event differently?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's really dependent on the type of event. I would say, in my experience for big music festivals, people just expect it as an app and they go online and they search it and find it. Depending on what type of event you organise, it's maybe not the case, and you do need to have that period of education and say, hey, go online, download the app for all of the different information that you need. I certainly feel like it's becoming more, like a lot of events that I go to now have apps, and it's becoming more mainstream. Apps typically have been super expensive to deploy for the organizer, but in the last 2 or 3 years, you've seen options come into the market that are not that expensive, and so I think people are getting used to it, but it doesn't hurt, I would say, to have some form of communication out to attendees. Email is still, I would say, the main platform that people, organisers would use to communicate, and most people still use email, and so that's a channel I would utilise to help people understand what other ways there are to find information about the event. Yep.
I'm just wondering, is there any advice on once you've got someone at the event and you want to sell them things, so what technology or platforms there are to easily allow payments on site?
Yep.
Compared to you have to have lots of EPOS
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Is there any
Yeah.
so you can maximise
Sure.
income while they're there?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different platforms. So the biggest one kind of around the world is Square, I would say, who do mobile payments. Unfortunately, they're not in New Zealand yet, but we have a bunch of partners that we work with who do cashless technology. So I'll go back to music festivals again, but a lot of them use the wristbands where you load cash up and you can go around and tap at a different vendor to buy a drink, or if you need to buy a t-shirt or whatever it is. And so that technology is starting to be used in a broader number of events, not just music. So we see a lot of food and wine events and consumer events using that technology. In the conference and business space, I haven't seen it as yet. RFID technology is certainly becoming more prevalent in that space, but that's more about lead retrieval and that sort of thing. But there are options out there. I would say the cashless technologies, you've got providers in New Zealand like AWOP and GlowNet who do that quite well. Yeah. Cool. Thanks guys for taking the time.